self-sufficient. Most people satisfy that test with the exception of homeless persons. And homeless persons are subject to administrative removal. You might have heard about Operation Nexus that was launched 5 years ago by the Met Police, where it established that people can be deported if they are foreign unconvicted criminals. So you don't even have to be convicted for a crime, you can be deported. And during an 8-week period, there was over 40,000 inquiries raised into who might be eligible for deportation, and about over 4,000 cases were, deportation causes were launched because of it. So it's significant. Secondly, another test is habitual residency, and again, Pete talked extensively about this idea of genuine prospect of work. But there's two basic questions, and again, they're not defined in statute, and it's about, have you been in the UK for an appreciable amount of time? Usually that's for a period of 3 months, but again, there's no case law that really establishes that, and there's nowhere in statute. And then the second question you have is, do you have a settled intention to live in the UK? And that's where a lot of EU nationals fall afoul, because you don't have a genuine prospect of work if, for example, you don't speak English at all or very well. Responses to homelessness and conditionality amongst migrants. So I basically interviewed 15 migrants from Eastern Europe who were in different stages of homelessness. Some were sleeping rough, some were in temporary accommodation, some were in incredibly overcrowded conditions, etc. And what became very clear to me is that when people are confronted with constrained choice, when you don't have the ability to earn wages to support yourself, you then turn to the informal economy, either through casual work, cash in hand, or maybe even illicit activity, or you rely on charity and donations or begging. But you have limited value from that, clearly. So then you begin to look at other ways that you can start to minimize the costs of things. And so for most of us, housing is the biggest expense on household budget. So how do you begin to deprioritize housing? How do you make housing less cheap? There is no generic brand of housing, so you have to go to other strategies. So some strategies will be living in overcrowded conditions, doubling up with other families, doing this hot bedding thing where if you're working in a shift pattern, you sleep during the day and then at night you go to work and then the other person takes your bed. You can live in illegal housing, you can live in substandard housing. There's all these things in order to be able to make housing less expensive. And at the extreme end, you can reside in an emergency shelter or you could sleep rough. So if what I'm concerned about is choice and how choice is constrained for migrants who find themselves in a very compromised situation in terms of all these different systems that are conspiring against them. Some participants in my study were very clear about having no choice whatsoever. And it was notable that a lot of the people that said that they had no choice they were Roma or Romanian. And I have a few quotes from some interviews I have, but one I thought, what struck me about these interviews was the level of deprivation involved. And Gabrielle's quote is quite succinct. We eat what we have. And what he was saying there is basically, I only have enough money for food. I have nothing else. Another thing that struck me with the interviews is the very low level of expectations people had for intervention from state and state assistance. One Roma participant who I spoke with named Vasil, maybe I'm pronouncing that acronym wrong, pseudonym wrong, but he's an amputee, he's missing a limb. He's been accommodated in temporary accommodation up a 3-story walk-up. And he mentioned about how difficult it is and how difficult it is for him to do day-to-day things, being accommodated in this place. But at the other hand, he's incredibly grateful. And he thanks God for what he has. So that's no choice. And on the other end of the spectrum, some people I spoke with were very adamant about the amount of choice that they had. In particular, the migrants from Poland, who all seem to share this very strong anti-establishment attitude, who rejected state assistance, rejected even participating in the formal housing market. They were quite adamant about sleeping rough as being their choice, and that they're exercising that choice. And you know, they all emphasize the benefits of not having to pay rent. David, for instance, he was explaining how it's his preference to stay in a squat, even if he was offered, say, council housing, he would reject it because he doesn't want to be constrained by rules and conditionality, and he also doesn't want to pay rent. He's working and he wants to maximize the little wages that he does have, and he does this by staying in squats. Peter, he's also pretty similar, although he was very adamant about the benefits of sleeping rough, referring to it as a holiday, as a venture, as you know, something that he very much chose. And he's not, you know, unfortunate in any way, shape, or form, and he refers to it as being a cheap life, an easy life. But I just want to, in making sense of this, I don't want it to make it sound that people are actually choosing homelessness, because that's not what I'm interpreting these stories as saying. The way that I'm interpreting them is the exact lack of choice that people have, that people are being made to deprioritize their housing to the point of homelessness. And that's what these stories reflect. The administrative removal, i.e. deportation of EU nationals, I had 2 respondents explain the process, how they experienced being deported. And Jakub, he's a very young Polish male. He explained about how he was on a bus one day, he lost his wallet, he lost all his documentation, he had no ability to verify who he was. And on top of that, he got kicked out of some digs he was staying at. So he was sleeping rough, he was with other people, they decided to steal some meat from a grocery store, and of course they got nabbed. And when they got nabbed, he got detained for deportation proceedings. What happened was they gave him basically 2 months to be able to go get his passport from the embassy, seek consular assistance, and find a job. And if he didn't do that within 2 months' time, he's going to be sent. So that was his story. Peter, his story was interesting. He got arrested for some offense. I think it was stealing, I don't remember which. But they arrested him, they detained him, and he describes the situation, the way that he understands the reason why he was being deported was because he was not claiming job seekers allowance. And the reason why they were asking if he was claiming job seeker allowance is to be able for him to demonstrate the fact that he was exercising his treaty rights as a job seeker. And if he doesn't have the ability to demonstrate that he's exercising his treaty rights, then he's subject to administrative removal. Now, he thought it was very ironic that someone from the Home Office was saying you must claim job seekers, when he thought that the whole argument and the whole message that was being sent to him was that we don't want migrants here claiming benefits and job seekers and all that. We want people to be self-sufficient and being a good citizen. So he went on this kind of rant about it being communism and people haven't learning. from communist situations. So he finds it quite strange, and he was in the middle of being deported because he didn't claim job seekers. Some policy implications, right? So